And frankly, it's just not that interesting to warrant an entire season. Sam's Cup of Tea. Sam's Cup of Tea. Hello and welcome back to Sam's Cup of Tea, and today I'm going to be talking about the Book of Boba Fett, or shall I say the Book of Mild Disappointment, because that's what it kind of is to me. If you check one of my previous videos, you'll know that I'm a big fan of Mandalorian. I'm a big fan of Star Wars, and I was really impressed with what they managed to do with Season 1 and actually Season 2 as well, because when I made that video, why Mandalorian saved Star Wars, I think I'd only just seen Season 1 at that point. I want to clarify now that Season 2 ended up exceeding my expectations and doing everything I loved in Season 1 and about the character and about the show, and it moved everything forward even more, and there were very few missteps in that show. So spoiler warning, if you haven't seen Mandalorian, I would go and watch Season 1 and 2 first, and Book of Boba Fett, because I'm going to be talking about a few spoilers here. But anyway, the way that the Mandalorian Season 2 ended was obviously with Luke taking Grogu, and it was insane to see Luke, but that was just the cherry on the cake of litany of great cameos, but also a show that was able to, was strong enough to sit on its own. It didn't necessarily need those cameos, but it's a show that earned it. At the very end of Mandalorian Season 2, there was a sort of, kind of segue into, the next season's going to be Book of Boba Fett. So, the Book of Boba Fett, it's about the Boba Fett, obviously, and he's a really famous, legendary character in the canon who has been sort of a mythical figure within Star Wars. All of the extended universe stuff, the comics, the books, fans' imagination and discussion about this character. Nobody thought he'd actually died in the Sarlacc pit, and having only been on the screen for a short amount of time, Boba Fett really made a big impact, a very sort of like kind of badass kind of impact, and imagining what he'd been up to. But also like a morally grey, probably an anti-hero, you could say, or just a straight out villain, because at the end of the day he was working for the Empire. And then we get that great cameo of him in Mandalorian Season 2, him showing up, and it did everything to satisfy Boba Fett fans, pretty much. We had him put on his suit, we had him fighting, looking like a badass, we had him in the Slave 1, I can't remember, and we had him even using the seismic charges, just all of that stuff. He was just so cool in it once he got his armor, and the way he kind of helped the main character Mandalorian out of a bind. It was great. But then at the end of the Season 2, there was this kind of setup where he sits in Jabba's palace, and it's sort of the Book of Boba Fett. And even at that point, at the end of Mandalorian, having loved the first 2 seasons, having loved Boba Fett's appearance, seeing that they were kind of going in this direction of like, now we're going to do a season about Boba Fett, I wasn't that excited, to be honest. I think that's for 2 reasons. The first reason is that I worried that seeing a character in the cold light of day, kind of at the forefront, would take away from the sort of mythical mysteriousness of Boba Fett. And the second reason was just that I wasn't that there didn't seem to be anything set up that was that interesting to explore. It wasn't like something had happened in the story where it was like, whoa, Boba Fett's gone on this mission. He's just sort of like sits on this throne, and he's become the kind of, I don't know, the criminal leader or something of Tatooine. And it was just like, and that kind of feeds into a lot of what my issues were with the show Book of Boba Fett. The whole him in Jabba's palace and stuff like that. I know it's a callback, and so let's talk about the actual show. Let's talk about what it does well first. I did actually enjoy the first 2 episodes, because I watched this quite later on. Again, it wasn't like The Mandalorian where I was, just desperately waiting for the next episode and watching it as soon as I possibly could. This season, I didn't watch it till later. I just wasn't that energized to go and see it, to put it on, And then unfortunately, because of my YouTube algorithms and the recommendations, I did see a few little spoilers. I saw a picture of Luke and I thought, oh God, and that made me think, oh, okay, this might be more than I thought. But I'd seen some lukewarm, also negative reactions as well. So I kind of went into it with low expectations. And the first 2 episodes were entertaining, right? They weren't amazing, but they weren't terrible. And like, for example, the production value is great. For a TV show, it really avoids having that TV show look. Not all the time. I'd say Book of Boba Fett looks like a TV show more than Mandalorian did, I think. But it does have great production values, great set designs, mostly great effects that are sometimes utilized in a bad way. I think sometimes it's just the actual direction that can look a bit odd. But actually, the CGI, the sets, the ILM, the projected sets, it all works really well. And there is this setup. There's a lot of flashbacks and stuff like that, and I was kind of enjoying it. If you've seen Book of Boba Fett, you will know that, of course, it's kind of segmented into some of it's about Boba Fett, and then it kind of goes off the rails towards Mandalorian, which are great episodes. I really enjoyed them. And it starts to kind of fill in, what's Mandalorian doing? The Darksaber, Grogu training with Luke. And it tries to resolve a bunch of those things strictly with Mandalorian. It's not even linked to Boba Fett. It is in a way, because Boba Fett sort of needs his help, having helped Mando in the second season. It's sort of like a favour he calls upon him. But instead of just showing, this is where Mandalorian is and now he's here, it just goes on this huge 2-episode sort of detour about, let's carry on with this. And it just feels like, is this Mandalorian? And there is a merging of, what is this? Is this Mandalorian? And I get what they're trying to do. And I sort of understand there are good intentions behind it, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to make the universe feel cohesive. So they don't just want, like, if Mandalorian's got his own show, they don't just want to make it look like, Mandalorian exists in a separate universe, and it feel disconnected. So when you watch Ahsoka's show, it doesn't feel like the same universe as Mandalorian's. They want it to sort of weave like almost like the Marvel universe, where it's like, here's this big galaxy that Star Wars had given us, and we want to tell a story that involves everyone. And even when it's a season about this character, well, we're going to have this character and this character showing up, and things kind of get a bit blurred. Now that I do understand and appreciate that approach that they're going for, that they're trying to sort of blur the lines. The problem is that the initial draw to Boba Fett is kind of like very contingent on a more hardcore set of fans, right? The Mandalorian kind of was a show that stood on its own. So people might have watched that and got really into it, that aren't big fans of Star Wars, that might have been, I'm a big fan of Star Wars, and I was kind of ambivalent about investing a whole season about Boba Fett, to be honest. I was a bit like, all right, I guess so, but I would rather see him sort of pop in and out, and have these great cool moments, instead of let's go right under the sometimes I think just putting a character under the telescope can sometimes be risky, because it's really hard to pull off. So in this, it does feel like, if you enjoyed Mandalorian season 2 and you're waiting for season 3, secretly, sort of, you have to kind of watch this. You have to go through all of this stuff about Boba Fett to get to the stuff about Mandalorian, because it resolves a lot of stuff with Grogu, and it actually sets Mandalorian up in a sort of new resolution for future Mandalorian episodes. I don't know, maybe they would have gotten away with it if Boba Fett's story felt more relevant, impactful. I don't know what it is. Now, here's the thing about Boba Fett, the Book of Boba Fett. I don't know why it's called the Book of Boba Fett. I don't know what that is. It sort of sounds like a manual, to live by or something. They do try and kind of reinvent Boba Fett's give him a new origin story to sort of wipe the slate clean. But what they end up doing is kind of sanitizing him. For example, when we see Mandalorian in the first season, he's sort of a hardened bounty hunter. He's a sort of anti-hero at the beginning. And then he comes across Grogu, and we slowly, throughout the episodes, sort of see him soften until he becomes something entirely different to what he was. He's still a bounty hunter, but he's also, really, his main sort of raison d'etre is Grogu, right, above everything, and also being a Mandalorian. But it's just he kind of, he's a new character that they were able to mold along with the audience. Boba Fett is an old character who we've seen very sporadically throughout the Star Wars universe in a very particular context, and they've just gone, let's reinvent him, but let's do that in an episode or two. So they have this kind of Tusken Raider backstory, which was semi-effective, but it ends up making him feel sort of sanitized in a way, like sort of to put him on the same, he's different to Mandalorian, but in that same kind of like, oh, he's just a good guy, he's just a good guy. And I think it would have been more interesting to see somebody who was a bit more morally grey, because we've got Mandalorian, we've got our bounty hunter turned kind of hero. I don't think we needed that with Boba Fett. I think we could have had him doing a bit more sort of things where you're like, whoa, like a sort of Walter White, Dexter type deal, where you kind of like him, but you kind of feel a little bit, and I guess, it is Disney and it's Star Wars, so I guess that's difficult to do. But then again, why do it then? I just think they sanitize him so much. And so it's like, all right, we're going to sanitize him. They're going to make him sort of this guy who becomes a sort of the new head of the, I don't know, what, I don't remember the word, but he's sort of like overseeing the gangs and the area of Tatooine. So, all right, they're going to do that. But then they make him, he's just so, he always makes the right decision. He's always compassionate. And it's all set on Tatooine. It's all set in this really small, and there's this politics going on with these different gangs. And frankly, it's just not that interesting to warrant an entire season, or at least in this case 4 or 5 episodes or whatever, about. It takes the context of, Jabba's palace and all of that, and him being the Hutts having controlled the crimes, all of that, which it is a famous part of Return of the Jedi, but arguably it's one of the most boringest parts. When people talk about the Return of the Jedi being quite a slow movie, they're talking about that first 40 minutes that's just in Tatooine and in Jabba's palace, and we saw all of that, and it sort of like feels like they're leaning on that a lot. Like, look, remember this? Remember when the Rancor used to be underneath there? And this was the first time where it did feel a bit like I'm watching a TV show. I'm not watching the core, something important to Star Wars. That's what took me by surprise with The Mandalorian, was that I expected to feel like that with Mandalorian. I expected to feel like, yeah, it's just going to be like a low-stakes story about some dispute on a particular planet, and take it or leave it. What was great about Mandalorian is it would focus on that for like an episode at a time. For example, there's one episode where he's on a planet and there's a certain thing going on, and then he's on another planet and there's something else going on, like a genocide happening, and they've got to but there's this overarching, much bigger story arc that is serving, right? That you kind of watching the episode for. So if a particular episode is like, don't really care about this, or maybe it's well done, it's in service to, in his case, here's a fucking Jedi, basically Baby Yoda, but Grogu, something that links you to the bigger universe, to Luke, to the Force, to the Jedi, something more epic for, the central fans. He's going to get this Baby Yoda of Grogu to the Jedi. Who are the Jedi? Who's it going to be? That was the lingering question throughout the first 2 seasons. Who is it going to be? And it ended up being fucking Luke Skywalker. So it was sort of worth that investment. So there were times when he would get stuck on a planet or he would be doing something, but there was this sense that it was in service of this higher thing. The Book of Boba Fett does not have that. There is no higher sort of, it is just about a dispute over who's going to be the leader of the thing. And it just sometimes feels so sort of insignificant to the, in the grander scheme of the Star Wars universe, especially since we're talking about like politics that's going on Tatooine at a very specific point in time, right? We're about to see Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I can't wait for, come out. And the poster, people were saying, oh, it's on Tatooine again. And I actually don't think that they're going to focus on Tatooine much. Probably just at the beginning and maybe at the end. But again, like, that's a completely different time in Tatooine. And all of that stuff that they've built up in Boba Fett is going to mean nothing because it's going to be a different time. Because Obi-Wan Kenobi's between Episode 3 and A New Hope. So that's when the Empire were at their peak or beginning, 10 years into it or whatever. And then you've got, Book of Boba Fett, which is, it's all about, Tatooine after. And it's just like, it doesn't feel that impactful. So one of my biggest criticisms of it is it's just small and unambitious. It's just small and unambitious in scale, especially for Star Wars, and compared to what The Mandalorian managed to do. It's also oddly structured, right? You have these kind of flashbacks, and there are little moments where there's these flashes to Kamino of him as a boy seeing Jango Fett, but nothing really comes of that. It's just a visual thing. I was thinking, there's going to be some, we're going to get a scene between him and Jango, or we're going to get some kind of insight. What about the kind of exploring the fact that his dad was modelled on the clones? Maybe there's something about that could be explored. No, nothing. And maybe they plan on doing it later, but it just feels like, why have they... It felt like they were holding back so much in this series, that it just didn't feel... And then also shoving all this stuff about Mandalorian, and it's almost like they use Boba Fett's time, like 2 or 3 episodes worth, to resolve all of the stuff that was left hanging with Mandalorian. Grogu training with Luke. Grogu doesn't want to train with Luke anymore. He's decided not to do it. And it just felt like... And also the fact that stuff happened with Luke, with Mandalorian, it did feel kind of rushed. It was great to see Luke. He had better CGI. It was like, wow. But at the same time, I didn't even get this sense that, they're going to resolve all of this now. Is that it? It's almost like they wanted to reset everything back to how it was before the end of season 2 Mandalorian. It's just it all feels very jumbled together. So you're getting these present day moments with Boba Fett, these flashbacks, and then other flashbacks which are even further when he's a boy, but I don't really know how that really factors into it. It doesn't really tell us anything about how that affected him, right? It just doesn't... It's really strange. It's like they had a whole season to focus in on Boba Fett, and I don't feel like I learned hardly anything. We did see him escape the Sarlacc pit, but other than that, it's like he gets his Slave 1 ship back, which I couldn't wait. When I first saw it, I was like, Slave 2, or is it Slave 2 or Slave 1? I don't know. His ship, right? And he uses it like a couple of times, but in a really kind of, I don't know, just... I wanted to see that thing flying around space. I wanted to see other planets. I wanted to see... Also, here's the thing as well. He barely uses his abilities. His gun, he barely shoots it. He's on his jetpack. There's a scene when he gets surrounded by these bikers, and I'll get to the bikers because that's also a kind of bone of contention for people. I saw there's a lot of what the hell is this? Robert Rodriguez was responsible for directing a few episodes. I think quite a few, even the finale and a few others. And it does feel a little bit Spy Kids-esque. But the problem isn't really the designs. I mean, that is a bit cheesy. But again, the prequels had weird designs, and there's been sort of different designs throughout Star Wars. It's not that. It's more that the characters just feel bland. And, all these people that are supposed to be cool, they just looked like... There was just nothing that they added to the biking gang, these extra characters that just didn't have a lot to them. The one person that stood out for me was Fennec Shand. She was really good in this. She was like what I wanted from Boba Fett. Always badass, doing really cool stuff. But there was just a lack of it. So there's a scene early on in the series when they're sort of surrounded by these guys with shields, and it's like they're circling them. And Boba Fett's like looking around, and he does nothing. He does nothing with his jetpack. He's sort of wearing his jetpack, and it's like, what? Fucking fly up in the air, And I think the other thing is, we saw with Mandalorian, the way that they got around that stuff, that thing of him having the jetpack, was it slowly built up to that, because he didn't have that at first. He sort of slowly gained this equipment. And that by the end, the payoff was that he was like fully like badass. He could fly everywhere he wants. And you know, the reason why they didn't have those really intricate scenes at the beginning, it was almost like easier to shoot scenes where he's restricted, right? He doesn't have his jetpack, and you know, so it's easier to write action scenes like, oh, he's stuck, because the fans will go, well, doesn't he do this? Why doesn't he do that, right? But Boba Fett, once he's got his armor, he's a fucking ultimate badass already. He's got his fucking gun, he's got his flamethrower, he's got the wire that comes out of his wrist, he's got the jetpack, and barely any of it gets used in this. And then on top of that, they introduced this new staff, which is cool, and it has his link to the Tusken Raiders that is changed in style. But even that's hardly used. It's very underwhelming. It's very underwhelming, and surprisingly, you've got this really badass character. Why aren't you? You know, he's in his prime. He's not like somebody who's been stripped of all of his stuff and he doesn't have his. And that's why he's been a badass for years. Why don't we see him doing that? And it's just, you just see him walking around and having negotiations with people, and you're just like, this just doesn't feel consequential. You know, it just doesn't feel like, wow. You know, another criticism. I've got loads of criticisms of this show. The thing is, I didn't hate this show. It just wasn't amazing. It didn't blow me away, and it was disappointing. And I just worry that this is what's going to happen from now on. We're going to get lots of these lackluster installments, and it's just not going to be, it's going to turn, I'm just going to stop watching it, you know. But another criticism was that he takes his mask off all the time. He takes his helmet off all the time. I'm sure they did that for a reason, to humanize him, to give Tamora Morrison, the actor, some scenes where he can actually, you know, act and we can see his face. But it does take away from the mystique of the character. You know, even in the Mandalorian show, he barely ever takes his mask off. Only like once, his helmet off. He only takes it off in the season 2, I think. And that's a couple of times he takes it off, and it's like, whoa, that's a big deal. But Boba Fett, you know, he isn't a Mandalorian, right? So he doesn't have to abide by those rules. But still, I think there's scenes when he has his mask on, and it's so much more. I keep saying mask. His helmet. It's so much more impactful when he has that on, because there's a sort of sense in which you don't know what you're not sure what he's thinking. He's got like a perfect poker face with that great helmet, but a lot of the time he's just stood there in a cafe, just holding it just feels, I don't know. It's the very thing that I worried about when it came to what this show was going to be. It kind of confirmed my fears in a way. Now, that's not to say that everything in the show is bad. There are some really interesting, like there's a great train sequence. There's some action sequences that are really well done. It's great to see a bit more about the Tusken Raiders. Those aspects are quite fun. It's great to see him and Mandalorian together. Their chemistry is good. When it turns to Mandalorian, those aspects were great. You know, seeing the stuff about the Darksaber, seeing Mandalorian actually get a refitted Naboo starfighter was fantastic. Silver, you know, it's just brilliant. You know, it was great to see Grogu again, but there were things in this show that felt a little bit lazier than it felt in season 1 and 2 of Mandalorian. I felt like Mandalorian 1 and 2 really, really kept you guessing. You were never quite sure what exactly was going to happen. You'd have the ideas, but it would always slightly skew one way. You know, it would do something to surprise you. It was very tight and very well thought out. This show had certain glaring issues, or just kind of lapses in coherence. I mean, for example, we're meant to see, you know, Grogu is training with Luke, and Mandalorian really wants to give him this like armor, and meanwhile before that he gets made the ship, the Naboo starfighter, and when the woman's making it, you see they show the bodywork being changed, and it's like, wow. And then they ruined the surprise of Grogu's decision in advance, because, and I'm sure, I don't know if other people noticed this, but I noticed it, and it just, so when they make the ship, they make like a little dome behind the cockpit, which isn't for a droid, because the droid doesn't need the glass dome. And I said, as soon as I saw that, I was like, that's for Baby Yoda. So obviously Baby Yoda's going to be reunited with Mandalorian. Like, why would you do that? Why would you show the audience that? Like, built into the very design of the ship is the future idea of this story. Like, why would you do that? And they even make a point of kind of, I'm sure the droid says something like, anyway. So I knew when it comes to that point where Luke very cleverly gives him that decision of, you can either take Yoda's lightsaber or you can take the Mandalorian helmet, but you can't have both. You have to not be a Jedi anymore. And it was like, this is a great conundrum, but it's been ruined by the fact that I've already seen his bloody ship. And I know that he's gonna pick that. He's not gonna pick the lightsaber. No way. There's just weird stuff like that. Like, why would you have shown that? And it, obviously, of course, right at the end, you do see Baby Yoda's head sticking out of the dome, like it was designed for. It's just really oddly thought out. So, I am excited about Mandalorian Season 3, I guess. But it just does concern me about what kind of stories they're going to focus on. I mean, Obi-Wan Kenobi sounds like it's a short mini-series. It's going to be focused, and it's about the actual core story that we all know and love about Star Wars. Obi-Wan Kenobi, his old Padawan Anakin, the father of Luke Skywalker and Leia. It's going to be amazing. That kind of stuff I'm excited about. The thing that concerns me is just, I don't want these shows to feel small. I want them to feel epic. And Mandalorian Season 1 and 2 felt epic. It felt like it earned its existence. But Book of Boba Fett, if you take out the Mandalorian parts, there isn't enough there to justify itself. It's as simple as that, And it has diminished Boba Fett as a character to me. Right now he seems, and of course characters should evolve and they should change, and that's okay, but there also has to be a reason for it. And I'm worried now, are we going to see more characters coming in and just being sort of sanitized into something that sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of mystique for certain characters. Like, fair enough, if they had a really great idea for Boba Fett, like, we're going to have this great mission and he's going to be in his Slave One, he's going to go on some kind of rescue mission or something like that, then yeah, I'm down for that. But with all these different elements of growth in the story, something that's justifiable, yeah. But it just felt like they'd already planned, like, oh, we'll just do a Boba Fett thing. People like Boba Fett, and I don't think they really knew what to do. That's what it feels like anyway. I mean, this is kind of a review, so I'm going to give it a score. Now I give it cups out of 5. So cups of tea, Sam's cups of tea. So out of 5, I will give this 3 cups out of 5 because it was okay. It wasn't terrible, but this was the first time where I saw it as a TV show. I was less interested. And I didn't like the way that fans of Mandalorian might miss really, really important parts of Mandalorian because they've been sort of snuck in to this season. So I feel like Boba Fett was sort of not given the love he deserved, really. Loved Mandalorian Season 1 and 2. Book of Boba Fett, less so. But we'll see what happens in the future. I can't wait for Obi-Wan Kenobi, the series. I can't wait. There's going to be a lot to talk about. So yeah, that's my video on Book of Boba Fett. Please comment down below. I want to see what did you think of Book of Boba Fett. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think there's more room for a story? Do you think they've been holding out, maybe? I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts down below. And also, please subscribe to this channel. I'm a growing channel, and every subscription and comment and view helps me. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Sam's Cup of Tea, signing off. Sam's Cup.